Yeah, this looks all right, you know.
It does, doesn't it?
I
want to get stuck into it, but is there any need when we've got the guests that we have today?
Yeah, Rene Meulensteen. Rene,
welcome to the show. Welcome back, actually, isn't it? Been on the channel loads.
Yeah, I've been here a few times.
Now, a multi-author. You got 2 books out. At least 2 books, at least. I've got Rene's first book, which, of course, it's the most Rene Meulensteen book ever, is a coaching manual, and mine is a well-thumbed copy. Mine's all curled over in the page and everything. Like, this is a regular visitor to Paddock FC training. It's full of drills. It's got loads of sort of like breakdowns of exactly why United was so good, and loads that I've copied, by the way. This second book, a bit more autobiographical. I'm assuming, looking at it. Let's get into it. So your second book, what made you write a second book?
The first book was really for a market for coaches, basically, the one that are in coaching. You see all the diagrams and everything. That is totally different than this book. But I still had, over the years, so many requests of people saying, listen, Rene, you've got so many stories to tell and so much knowledge to share. So it's not a normal sort of autobiography that you go and look, I've done this and I've seen this and this was a great game. I also want really the readers to take something from it, that they get, some insight, some detail, information, and even inspiring coaches can take advantage of it, because there's a lot of knowledge in there that they can use to their own benefit.
Well, I haven't read this yet. This obviously my copy he gave me today, so I haven't got into this one just yet. But I've had a flick through some of the chapters, and I think there's going to be a bit of that in there. But I will say the first one. You're not going to need the first one to read this one, I don't think. But the first one's very good, and I will definitely agree that it is a technical coaching book. But I also think that United fans could read that book. They're going to thumb through the drills, because there's quite a lot of pages at the end with drills. But there's a lot in terms of how United was set up to be successful. He's saying this is the detail of what was quite basic in that book.
It just reads in a different way. But I think people that have the previous book will recognise that clearly in that book. The only thing is, I'm a very sort of, when I put things down, I like to put things down in an easy way to understand, rather than a lot of words. I use bullet points, and then maybe, and that was the ideal for the previous book. This is basically where you go through what I think, makes a successful team, because you go back to that period where I was the first team coach. I mentioned that was Sir Alex Ferguson. And it turned out to be the most successful period in history. But then, okay, why was that? Why was that? Right?
Casually drop that in there.
No.
Just don't worry about that.
No. But the thing is this: listen, don't get me wrong. There's nothing solely only to do with me. But sometimes, if you start to think about it, and you start, things, these are the important key parameters, and then you start to think, okay, where are they now? That's. And
you also had an influence from an earlier stage, because obviously a lot of people remember you as the assistant to Sir Alex Ferguson, but you were there through the academy, through the reserves, a couple of years before that as well, because you had I joined
Manchester United in 2001. Basically, I've worked in every department of the club, which was great, because when I came, I actually was working as a manager in Qatar. I was managing Al Sadd, and previously the year before I was managing Al Ittihad, which was going actually really well, because I came to sort of the crossroads, and I've already spent 8 years in the Middle East by saying, well, probably I'm going to spend the next 8 years here in the Middle East as well, because, we were very successful in those 2 years, won 3 trophies, so no reason to move. But then suddenly Man United came to the scene, and I basically moved back from being a manager to going back to coaching and skills development.
How did that come about? How does, let's be real here with no disrespect, an obscure manager in Qatar get that phone call?
Well, you have to understand the start of the whole story. But originally, obviously, I'm Dutch. I'm born in Holland in a very tiny village in Bergen, and I was on the local football club every single day. Whether I was training myself, playing with friends, watching other teams train, and whatever it was. And then one day, the young on the 8s or on the 9s were training, and the coach said, "Rene, can you help me? Because you're always here anyway." I was about 16 at the time. "You're always here, can you help?" "Yeah, fine, no problem." So I quite enjoyed that, joining in this and the other. But after 3 weeks, because of work commitments, he couldn't do it anymore. So I just sort of carried it on from my 16 years of age. But then one day I was walking in the next door village, and I was in a bookstore in the window. There stood this book, and it says the plan for the ideal footballer, written by Will Curver. And I went inside, took the book, and I just sort of started to go through it. And there was all these pictures, 4 pictures of how to execute a particular move, like the Cruyff turn or the stop turn or the scissors. I thought, that's interesting. Then I read the preface, and I thought, well, that's, nobody has to have to go to university to understand what Will Curver really meant. And in a nutshell, what he said was, all those, FA coaching courses for every country, right? All of that, they're all made up by themselves. He basically said, there's only one way to find out what we should be coaching and teaching the young kids. Look at the best teams and look at the best players. And I thought, yeah, he's absolutely spot on. And then he said, and from the attacking sense, if you look at all those players, which you all know, from Stephen, Puskas, Cruyff, Beckenbauer, Charlton, Best, all the way to Maradona, all the way to Messi and Mbappe and Ronaldo, they all have got one thing in common. They've got the ability to dominate the 1v1, and they do it in different ways. Combination with speed and power, but they've got all these attributes, step overs, Cruyff turns, scissors and all that. So I got intrigued with that. Then, as my journey started, I wanted to work for this guy. I wanted to learn. I knew that was difficult for me to get, because I've never really played professional Holland, sort of a semi-professional level. But I got the chance to go and work with Will Curver in Qatar at the time. And that was an amazing experience. We worked 6 days a week with kids that came all over, just from Qatar. But a lot of times there were kids from foreign parents that went to Qatar to work, so they're not necessarily, straight direct Qataris. There were some, but not all of them. And the progress we made with those kids was just unbelievable. I said to Will Curver many times, I says, can you imagine if you do this in a good country, in a big club, where they're all, you've got talent when you walk through the door? We'll be flying. Mm-hmm. And I, in that particular time, I went regularly back to England to keep doing my badges, because I knew.
Did you do your badges in England?
I did, yeah. I did them in Holland up to my training coach 1, which allows me to be an assistant coach. But I wanted to do the pro license as well, so I went to England. And whilst I was doing that, I got to know Dave Richardson, who was appointed by Howard Wilkinson to look after the academies, to making sure they ticked all the boxes. And one of the things that they identified was a lot of academies, they ticked all the boxes from the facility point of view, and they took, but not from the contents. And Man United was one of the clubs that was struggling to find a technical coach. So they rang Dave Richardson and said, listen, Dave, we have a problem here. We need a technical coach. We can't find anyone in England. Do you know anybody? And Dave, who's already tried to get me into England for about 5 or 6 clubs, and nothing worked, nothing. And he said, yeah, I know somebody, but he's not English, he's Dutch, he works in Qatar, but he knows everything about the Curver method, and his speciality is skill development. Can we meet him? He said, of course. And funny enough, he's coming to England next week because he's going to join me on a conference. So that being said, I stayed at Dave Mackay's house at that time. And it's important to tell you that as well, because Dave Mackay was, at a particular time, the under-17 coach of the Qatari national teams. And he was my next-door neighbour. And he just left Qatar, sort of thing. And I stayed with him because the conference was somewhere in the Nottingham area. And Dave, obviously, as everybody knows, was the legendary Tottenham player. He won the league in Scotland, international, this and that and the other. I didn't know that, but I found it out later. Not this, but I found out later that Ferguson held him in really high esteem. I only found it out later. Anyway, good long story short. So I met Les and Jeff Watson, one of the scouts at Man United, the one at Stretford in one of the little chef's restaurants, I always remember. So I prepared myself well. I've had some stuff for them to read through. I've brought one of the videos that we made with the kids. I said, Les, take your time to read it, to understand it. But listen, I guarantee you, if we implement this at Man United, we're going to develop again some world-class players for Man United, and if not, for some really good players for other clubs with a lot of market value. He says, that's great, Rene, fantastic. He says, do remember things at Man United go really slow. It's like an oil tanker at times. So don't worry. He says, no worries, because I'm still in a job in Qatar, so I want to finish that anyway. So I go back to Dave Mackay and I told the story. So I met Les Kershaw, Not that I wanted him anything to do, but here we go. So I'm back now in England, in Qatar, in September, beginning of October. And the phone rings, Dave Mackay rings me. And he says, Rene, has Sir Alex Ferguson rang you? And I started laughing.
Obviously not.
And I started laughing because, honestly, if there was one guy that was taking the mickey all the time, it was him, Dave. He had a great sense of humour. He says, no. He says, but I've just hung up on Prince Charles at the time. Now is he king, but Prince. And he started, no. He says, I've just spoke to him and he said he was going to ring you. It's about, half an hour ago. I said, have you given him the right number, Dave? Because I told you last time Qatar added a 5 to the sequence. That must be it. And okay, he hang up. Now, 5 minutes later. Hello, Rene. Alex here. Well, there you go. So I had a conversation with Sir Alex for about 20 minutes, and we agreed that when there was a gap in my season, which was in January, if I could come over, just have a chat with him, have a chat with Les, obviously another Les, and obviously other people of the academy. But what Dave did, because he rang Sir Alex, I didn't know that, and said, I know that people of your club are looking to appoint a technical skills coach, and I happen to know the guy, and I worked with him for a bit, and I can recommend him, from a coaching point of view, but also as a person. And so that put a lot of weight on Ferguson's plate, made everything much easier, and that is how it came about.
I mean, isn't it mad that Sir Alex is involved to that level at that age group? When you think he's so busy running the biggest football club in the world that he's like, hang on, let me just block out my afternoon and make sure we get a technical development coach for the academy.
It does, but it's testament to him because he wanted to make sure that he knew everything was going on in the club, and he wanted to create an edge anywhere he could create an edge. And he did it, and that's what I liked about him, because I'm of the same generation as Marco van Basten, Ruud Gullit, Ronald Koeman. But, I've not got the career that they had. And a lot of times people walk into jobs because of their names. And he didn't know who I was, you know what I mean? He couldn't care less. I just need certain qualities to making sure that we keep progressing within the academy. And if I believe that Les Kershaw says you're the right man, and Dave Mackay, and Dave Richardson, then you're probably going to be the right man, so...
Yes, people, what's going on? As you may have already heard, we are brought to you by Manscaped. Yes, and we have got a special little code for you guys. Head down there into the description, click the link. The code is Paddock20, and you will get 20% off plus free shipping with that code. And seriously, you want to head over to Manscaped because it is a smooth sack summer, ain't it, Joe?
Manscaped is the global leader in below-the-belt grooming. Over 8 million men trust Manscaped. So why would you be any different? Do you know what I mean? And what do Manscaped bring? They bring the Performance Package 4.0. Now, if you just think one-stop shop to sort out my male grooming needs, that is the Performance Package. It's got everything. Let's start with the Lawnmower 4.0. The Lawnmower 4.0, Adam, what does it mean to you?
It means everything to me, Joe.
It's
something as well that, I went away recently, and I have my cheeky little Manscaped, which I take everywhere with me, by the way, for all the nooks and crannies that need to be looked after. Mm-hmm. But I happen to have a little shaver as well for the old beard. But guess what? That doesn't have a cheeky, multifunctional on-off button, which you can turn the safety on. Yeah. And what happened was, my battery in that one was finished.
Unbelievable.
In my Manscaped Lawnmower 4.0, no chance. Got a little light on there as well, so when you are sweeping down into the nether regions, it's fully lit. You know what I mean? Because it is quite dark down there, especially if it's been a couple of weeks since you last Manscaped.
There's a thicket that needs wading through, isn't there?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like going into some dense undergrowth with just a man with a machete is not going to cut it.
No.
He needs a light as well. And
plus, you may cut it with a machete.
Yeah.
But you're going to cause a lot of issues along the way.
I've done all sorts in the past. I used to get, when I was younger, just scissors and get them as flat to it as I could. And you're nicking, you're grabbing, you're pinching. Genuinely, that's what I used to be doing until Manscaped rolled around.
Yeah.
It is so much better. Also, it's not just the lawnmower. They've got all sorts. They've got the ear and nose hair trimmer. They've also got crop reviver, ball toner, crop preserver, ball deodorant. You put deodorant under your arms, on your back, and this and that, the other. But you think, it's an area that needs not just a bit of smell protection, but also something that is formulated just for that area because it's sensitive. Manscaped have got you covered top to bottom. And
I've got the old shower gel as well.
The shower gel as well, which is absolutely sensational. And also, in the Performance Package, you get the boxers, briefs, and the Manscaped Shed travel bag as well.
Anti-chafing briefs.
It's fantastic, and they wick away any unwanted moisture. Do you know what I mean?
They are great for the gym as well. They're quality.
Absolutely fantastic. And also, take a look at the Shears 2.0, which is the luxury nail grooming kit. You've got the file, you've got the clippers, you've got everything. Like, genuinely, just go to manscaped.com, use our code Paddock20, get 20% off and free shipping. Just take a look at everything they got. It is phenomenal. Manscaped.com, use the code Paddock20 for 20% off and free shipping.
Get stuck in.
So when you came in, you come in and you're dealing mainly with what age groups was it?
Academy initially, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. What the setup was at United at that time, particular time, you still had the rule in place where you could only scout within an hour and a half. So there was a lot of other clubs fishing in the same pond. But what they had development centres around, so the kids only had to travel no more than 15 minutes to go there. The only problem was there was, like, say, 2 coaches or 2 scouts attached to those development centres, but they're all doing their own thing. And it's like
No
all
curriculum
small,
something.
but it's like all small Tesco shops somewhere, and they're selling completely different things than the main supermarket. So I had to streamline that first to say, bring all the coaches in, all the scouts in, and say, right, back to your previous book, that's all be written about, basically on the jigsaw puzzle, to making sure that they understood that and how important that element of that skills development to put in place, so important at the early stages. So we did that. And then we had everybody doing the same thing. What we then did, and I have to say the people who were in there were absolutely magnificent, with Mike Glennie, helped me a lot, and he was sort of the liaison officer for the parents, because you need to get the parents on board. That's never happened before. Because I did parent education, I brought them in. You're going to see something completely different. But if you don't say the right things to your son, when bringing him here or taking him away, you're actually undermining everything we try to do. So that all helped, and all the people sort of joined in, and all the coaches, they bought into it. So the process sped up fairly quickly. What we then did, we put 4 advanced centres in between the development centres. So let's say development centres 1 till 6, they feed into advanced centre A, and so on. So 7 till 11 into B, and so on. And then every week I brought 2 advanced centres into the cliff, and then we worked with them. You know what I mean? And the next one, it was C and D, and then it was A and C, and then it was, like that. So over a period of a year, and every time when we did those sessions on a Sunday, they were like sort of, for all the coaches of the development centres, they could come, because, they could join in, and they were learning new things to take back to the development centres. So it was a big...
What age groups?
They were like on the 7, 8. Now, obviously, it's starting even earlier, but they were all 7, 8 years of age. It was always on the Littleton Road in the cliff. Then I started to introduce, to take away from the under-9s, the 8v8 games, because I felt, listen, if you want to make kids really, really technically good, it's all about repetition and success. Because if they got success, the confidence grows, et cetera, et cetera. But if you want to teach kids technical, and the other problem is, because every time I hear people discussions about tactical training, it every time happens so often. The problem is that there's no really, they don't know the structure to it, how to do it. They talk about it, but there's a clear structure to it, how to start, how you progress, and where that doesn't need to end up. So then I introduced the 4v4 program instead of the 8v8. Because if you guys are all 7, 8 years old and we're training, and they give you both a ball, you got 100% repetition, because you don't have to share it with anybody. But I give you just one ball, you're 50-50, because it goes down with 50%. Now, obviously, there's many ways to teach those techniques. You start with individually, everybody a ball, and then you do bring, opposition in on a post, and then you gradually go like that. But it's the same thing. So every week is all focused on skill development. Then you're going to play 8v8. 16 players on the pitch, one ball. There's no logic to it. So we created that 4v4 program.
Yeah, you get one good player on one of the teams, and he's got 70% of the ball for starters.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But then we created a 4v4 program, which was studied by Manchester University. Rick Finoglio did a report on it for a year, and all that data is still there to see. And it was very clear that in 4v4s, and I created 4 different games, where the games actually was challenging the kids into 1v1. So if it was with goals and goalkeepers, it was all about making a move, go past somebody and shoot. You know what I mean? When it was with smaller goals, with cones, where you can shoot, but the chance that you miss the target is much bigger. So you need to be a little bit more patient to find that gap and to see if you can beat somebody and then score. The 4-goal game was all about changing angles And the line dribble game, so you just had to defend the line, was all about being direct, running over the line and all that. So the kids loved it. Because those kids, they just want to play. They don't care about whether it's a 4v4.
And does that have to all kind of get approved from the top, from the main man has to, or are you kind of just, is he delegating it all over to you and it's in your control once he trusts you, or is there kind of like an approval through the ranks? And
There's obviously I had to get everybody on board of the academy, in terms of Les Gorsha, the academy manager, first of all, that. Then the other ones, Paul McGuinness and Tony Wheeling, who's played a massive role in the academy, all of that. And they were all, because you could see the progress and the enjoyment of the kids and everything, rather than, coming on a Sunday morning where the wind is blowing and it's raining and there's 8v8 game, 8 players, and there's another 6 substitutes. And who knows where they're coming from? They probably just travelled an hour and a half. You know what I mean? Some kids, they don't even get on the pitch because it's Man United and we need to come back with a good result. You know what I mean? That's not development. Yeah. You know what I mean? So therefore, I don't know whether they still do it now, but I hope they do, because at the end of the day, it is the best format for grassroots football.
And you kind of went through the ranks as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
So you said there you're working with under 7s, under 8s. You end up then going to the reserves, which obviously are older bracket of players and some more familiar names that we would
So initially I did all that development centre, advanced centre stuff, the grassroots level, but I also started to work with a little bit with, obviously, with the under 11s, under 12s, you know what I mean? And here and there chip in with the under 13, 14s, did some stuff with Paul McGuinness's under 18s, because I felt that you need to start as young as possible, because that's where the base is the widest. You can give them the most, and eventually, obviously, they find their own way. If you start higher up the pyramid, but the base is already, the players are already set in terms of the position, the sort of style, but you can still add, and I consciously say add, because that is the biggest coaching word that I feel that there is, because I would never say to a player, even the first team players I work with, I would never say, well, listen, I think we need to change something on your game, because then, change, what I'm doing wrong. Yeah. But as soon as you say add, they say, oh, great, it's
an
more.
Improvement.
Yeah, show me, what is it? And I feel, and that is the discussions that I had with Ferguson over a particular time, I said to him, listen, he said, it's going great at the grassroots level, blah, 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 and all this and that and the other. He said, yes, but there's still things to be gained, percentages to be gained at first team level as well, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5% even, and those 5% is going to make a hell of a difference in you winning games and winning trophies. I said, what do you mean? Because if we add this to all the players become more confident, in their particular positions. We keep the ball better rather than kicking it out, because they don't know what to do with it. We're going to be more unpredictable in the forward in our forward play. So and he bought into that, and then I already started to work with some individual players like Diego Forlan. He was the first one I started with, because Diego was, unfortunately, he's never really made the name for himself at Man United, which I hope he was going to do. But he was a very talented player, quick, both feet, left and right.
He left, didn't he?
But what happened? Sometimes you get players at the wrong time at the wrong place. You know what I mean?
He was the right player at the wrong time, wasn't he?
Yeah, he had somebody like Ruud van Nistelrooy in front of him who scored once or twice, if not 3 times. So he's not going to be replaced. But the advantage of Diego was he was versatile. He could basically play in all front 3 positions. Yeah. However, he didn't really have like a lot of tools, technical attributes to shift the ball and then have a shot. So I started to work with him on that. Little step overs, you know what I mean?
Because he was just at the wrong time, where you said he played right across the front 3. We never really played a front 3 in those early days when he first arrived, and obviously if he would have been able to play them with a main striker, he would have probably seen a different player in England. But when he left, unbelievable.
European Golden Boot the year he left.
So he won it twice, didn't he? The Golden Boot, World Cup Golden Boot. I think he shared as well.
What I liked about him, because obviously when he started to realise this is great, I really love it, and he started to get some joy in training. And then the players started to pick up, what you been doing? You know what I mean? And I said to him, listen, when you go to a new club, you go to a new club and you've added so much to your game, which they don't know of. See, all those players here at Man United, they know that you're going to do this stuff, and you know that you're going to try this and try that, and not everything comes off. So they're basically sort of sussing you out. But that level of unpredictability will be there when you go to another club, and you will only get better at it. And then he went to Villarreal, obviously later to Atletico Madrid, and absolutely fantastic, great international for Uruguay as well.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Diego wasn't he?
Yeah, was there many players doing 1v1s with you at the time?
Then obviously there were more coming in. Obviously I've done quite a bit. At one point I can remember Eric Alex Harrison asking me, he says, could you do some work with Giggsy? I says, why? What's with him? Because if there's anybody that's got so many natural skills and ability, it's him. Yeah, but he's obviously coming to a different phase in his career. He's not as explosive as he once was when he was 17, 18, 19. So he sort of needs a little bit of maybe a refresher sort of things that say, you know, you can be as effective, but in a slightly different way in terms of changing the angles, you know, in different parts of the pitch and making different decisions. The one thing that we discussed with him as well was the yoga aspect, because he came off a few hamstring issues and all that, and I knew from other people that done it and had really good results, and I spoke to him about it. Says, have you ever considered it? And he says, no, you've thought about it. And obviously then he started to look into it, and he's then started to do that. It's never looked back. But Giggsy did this stuff. Then Ruud van Nistelrooy came in, done stuff with him.
Did you get players wanting to come and work with you because they had seen like, oh, what's Diego been doing? What's he been doing? I want to go and get
Cristiano came very quickly, because at one point, you know, I did some stuff after the training and just to the corner of the pitch, and Diego was up, and Cristiano saw that we were doing. So what were you guys doing? Well, join in if you want. You know what I mean? Join in if you want. And basically, you know, he loved it because he was, you know, he had fantastic skills and all that. But the key for me was to make Cristiano more functional within us. You know what I mean? It said it's all great to do 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 step overs, and you're still in the same position.
Yeah.
It's about hurting opposition. You know what I mean? It's about an end product.
Because he used to get criticised for that, like he'd beat a man and then go, all right, actually I'm going to go back and I'll beat him again, and I'll go back and I'll maybe try and get a foul. And there was that, you're such a great player. And I remember at the point, Fergie was really on it with targets, and you have to get this many goals. And seeing that change in not just Ronaldo, but any player, that must be so rewarding as a coach to be like,
oh, fantastic.
I've worked with that on him.
100%. Because you could, because what I would always do, and then eventually, a lot of people saw that the benefit from it. Then the medical staff came to me and says, listen, Rene, when we've got players bringing back, and we do a lot of sessions before they actually go back in team training, could you not fill that void? Because we are not really coaches. We don't know really what to do. So I could then suddenly had, you know, with these players, could be really game specific. So if I would work with a defender, I would look at his aspects of the game where I can think, listen, if you get in these moments, this is how you can get out of trouble. Same with midfielders, same with forwards. So, you know, that package was perfect. So I had a lot of individual contact time with a lot of players, you know, before they then got back into group training. And as soon as the players see that what you try to explain to them, and like I said, I've always would pick clips that I could show them and said, listen, this is what you do here. But if you look at this, for instance, this moment, if you would have done that particular move, that is what would have happened, and these options would have opened up. And then I would probably use clips in the games that they had done it. So I would say, hey, Steve, come here, because you've played a few games, you've seen a few things, have a look at this. And then they see themselves and they think, bloody hell, yeah, great.
I can do it.
It's fantastic. You know what I mean? Because then, you know, the proof is there for everyone to see. You know, and the other thing I follow on from that individual coaching was when I got the chance to take the reserve team. And that's a funny story at itself as well, because Ricky Sobraja was taking it, and he obviously went to
Bolton, didn't he?
Yeah. And I thought about it. It says, because really the one thing that was missing for me was I need to find a way to show the manager in some shape or form how that skill development is going to be integrated in a team setting. So now everybody, you know, like, so this opportunity came down. So I wrote a letter to Fergie and I slipped it under the door early morning before I said, what time are you here, boss, tomorrow? He says, tomorrow only 9 o'clock or something. So great. So at least I thought I turned up about 7:30 knowing that he wasn't there. I slipped it under the door. And I thought, see what comes out of it. Basically in the letter I said, listen, why would you look for a solution outside whilst you might be already in the building? And it would be
wink.
And it would be, yeah, exactly. It would be a great opportunity for me to sort of, you know, implement all that skill development work into a team setting. So anyway, he called me and...
Hang on, how nervous are you throwing that under the door, by the way?
I don't know.
You put it under the door, though.
No, but even then, you'd be like, oh... Because Fergie's obviously got this reputation as being quite ferocious, and I'm sure there's elements of truth to that, but he can't be like that every day.
He was open to work. I think Fergie at that time was so open to kind of changing, and he wanted that second European Cup that I think he would have just been open to a lot. At least it felt like that.
been there a
I
few
can
years,
talk
I
to
guess,
you
but-
about it a little bit in a moment about, you know, Ferguson being ferocious, but I'll tell you something, what I feel, how I've experienced it. But that latter went under the door and he clocked me in the canteen. He says, "Rene, can you come in my office?" I said, "Yeah, fine." So I went in his office. He says, "I had some mail today." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Some coach sent me a letter." He says, "Do you know him?" He says, "Yeah, I know him. I know him quite well." He says he was talking about taking the reserves and I actually quite like the idea. What do you think? He says, "What does he say?" "Well, he wants to take the reserves and he can combine it with the stuff that he does in the academy." I said, "Yeah, I think go for it." And that was the sort of conversation.
Talking about someone else, even though you sat there in the room.
Exactly. All right, okay. Oh, tell him then that he can do it. Okay, thanks, boss.
How did you find that change from individual training and focusing on individuals to then, all right, now I have to deal with a team, I have to maybe implement tactics in certain games. How did you find that?
You say he was managing in Qatar.
Yeah.
So it's not new, is it?
So
There's
I've
no
already,
change, yeah.
I've already.
Just the age group.
It was just but what I felt was at the time that all those players in the reserve team, they were all a little bit like almost they looked like lost, you know, at times, you know, heads down, you know, shoulders down, you know, people a lot of uncertainty, you know, some wanted to go and make that push to the first team, some wanted more game time in the reserves, some wanted to maybe go on loan. So it's a really difficult group, really. But when I got them together, all together, and the one thing, it says, I promise you one thing. It says, it doesn't matter because I know the challenges that we have, because we're not always working with the same group. We're not always working with the same numbers. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 30. You know, whatever they throw at us. It said, but I can guarantee you one thing. Every session that we'll do will have a purpose. It says, and every session with a purpose, we have a challenge, and they will revolve around quality and intensity. And I make sure that every single one of your ambitions, right, we're going to work hard to meet them, whether that is going to the first team, whether that's going on loan, whether that's playing and all that. Now, suddenly, they started to feel, you know, that somebody was looking after them. But I also have another set. I said, I've got another challenge, he says, because I want to play in a certain way. And that is where the skill element is such a high level that whatever situations we encounter in 1v1 situations, whether the opponent presses us or we look for it, we have the capability to outplay them, you know, in a way that Man United wants to play. I really enjoyed that season because I had, Johnny Evans, Gerard Piqué, Giuseppe Rossi.
It's not a bad sense.
It's a
that partnership,
fucking
is it?
joke on the
Fraser
reserve
Campbell.
side, isn't it? Let's
Fraser
be honest.
Campbell.
Evans Blake. around
Evans
that
Blake
point.
was there,
Yeah.
Richie Jones, Phil Marsh,
Was David Petrucci?
Marcus Neumeier. No.
Is that later?
That's later. Marcus Neumeier. And I always remember, we played City at Hyde, and Steve Wigley was the manager at Hyde, and they had something. I found something, you know, an article, which highlighted a few things which I could use to motivate the players, and I put it up in the dressing room for everybody to read. And it was basically a story of saying, listen, that's the difference between you guys are sitting here, you know, because you belong here. If you wouldn't have been here, you would have probably in the other dressing room. But anyway, I got called in by the referee to come into the City dressing room because of some shirt with the goalkeepers, whatever they solved it. But anyway, I stood there and sort of Steve was facing me, but behind him on the wall was all these A3 flip charts about, you know, how they were going to beat us. The line up and the set piece. So I just sort of listened to him and all this. But in the meanwhile, I was sort of glancing over to see what I could. Anyway, so we shook hands and all that. Wished each other good luck. I said, Steve, don't think it will work today. So I walked off, and we were absolutely battered them. You know, I think it was 4-0 at half time. I think Giuseppe scored twice, and Fraser Campbell. It was just one of the best performances that we had. Initially, it ended up 6, and it could have been 8. It could have been 10, but it was a really, really good performance. Everything fell into place. It was great. So there was quite a few people there, and a few of my mates came that live around the Wilmslow area. So they said, "Come and on the way back, come and have a drink with us at the Unicorn, which is just around the corner." So yeah, it's fine. So I sat there, like I said with you guys, and the phone rang. Sir Alex. Hi, Rene, how you doing? Good. And he was in Milan scouting for the Champions League. He says, I believe the boys did well today. He says, boss, they did brilliant. They were absolutely fantastic, every single one. Can't leave a single players out because everybody was top notch, and to then have a game and beat your in the derby, beat them 6-0, fantastic. But there was a bit of noise in the background, obviously in the pub. So he said, "Where are you?" I said, "What do you think I am?" I said, "I'm having a drink in the pub. I'm celebrating." "Good for you, lad."
I love that.
But they were great. They were great moments, and it was a great year, that year of the reserves, because we won the treble that year.
What did you make of the level of reserves? Because obviously it changed into like under 23s a few years down the line after that. Do you think it's good enough and functions enough to kind of get these players ready for first team football?
Yeah, well, what we did, and because I knew how important that was when I was actually taking the reserves, because the key to find out whether the reserves is the best gauges are your best players in the first team. It sounds simple, but they tell you if somebody comes across a young player. And that's why you need to create these contact moments. So what we did when I was the first team coach, and let's say the first team had played, you got the players that had started and played most of the game, they're in recovery, so they weren't in training. The ones that didn't play or played just only 30 minutes, they were in training. But then you had to think about what's the group. Sometimes you had 8, sometimes you had 10. Now we want to work in a bigger group. Well, let's bring 5 or 6 or 8 of these reserve team players across, and you pick and choose. And then really those players learn what the level is. So can they handle that? And the senior players or the first team players, they can see, well, he's good, or like that sort of thing. So it's a really good gauge. But the more you do that, the easier those players they find it if they get called up. So they don't really get there's not really that massive gap. So that worked really well for us at that time.
Keno had left by then as well, hadn't he? Who was the sort of first team enforcer at the time? I imagine Scholes and Giggs would have been pretty vocal.
Genev was still knocking about.
Yeah, look, Scholes was never really vocal. He just led by example, you know what I mean? But obviously Gary Neville was always there, Rio, Giggsy, they were all the main key guys.
Were there any moments or like any where a young player had one of those crossovers into the first team with the first team players and had just absolutely teared it up?
Well, I did one. What I used to do, and the players loved it. You see, excuse me. Sometimes you have to find the right balance, because at the end of the day, the guys just love to play football. So I created these sort of small-sided games or tournament type thing. Could be 7v7, 8v8, 6v6, whatever it was. No matter the numbers we had, and just play like a round robin. But I would then sort of pick and choose, like say the teams. So I would, for instance, pick, let's say Rio with like a young centre back, like Michael Keane or something, put him. And I put, for instance, Scholesy with Ravel Morrison. And I put a front.
It's a naughty team, by the way.
and up front I put, like 2 others again, just to, to see how they would, fare with each other. And some of the football was just fantastic, because young kids, they bring so much energy and intensity, where the senior ones, they play more on
maybe want to just coast through
experience,
training,
and they know, you know what I mean. But they loved it. They loved it. They loved it, and they had some great discussions about, he looks good, he's this, he's that. So you get a lot of information out of it. It was really good format.
Without naming any names, because I don't think that's fair, but was any reserve players step into that first team environment and just not be able to handle it?
Not handle it as such, but then suddenly the execution of things, is everything goes quicker. Everything needs to be absolutely spot on. The standards that is acquired, and the expectations amongst the players is just, on the highest level. I mean, that is, I think, some of the things that stands out if you go to really, really top level, and to the level below. The level below accepts failure. And what I mean by that is that's where you hit wrong pass. Hard luck. Right, well done. You know what I mean? Well, at the highest level, they will absolutely tear you to pieces. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because that's the standard set. You know what I mean? Get your act together. You know what I mean? And that is the difference. They don't accept failure. I mean, if you look at the whole in a whole, and you look at that, and I think that is something what I felt was so well, because it was obviously, almost sort of put in place by Sir Alex. But if you look at a club the size of Man United over the years, he started in '86, and obviously he built those different teams, and over the years, and then success started to come. So when I came, I sort of came in on the back end of his career. So he was already successful. So the ambitions of the club were always...
You came in just around the time when he was about to retire, and then he didn't, and you came in kind of just after that. It was like a second... Yeah. It was the second era of Fergie, wasn't it? And he wanted to get that second European Cup. He kind of had to change.
So when I came back on the I think early 2000, then late 2000.
Because you went to Bromby for a season in between. Yeah. Right?
So I came back on the halfway through that season. So sort of I started again. Let's say the back end of 2006. As a technical coach with the first team. So I did that, and then obviously Carlos left, and then I got promoted to assistant manager, me first team coach. But what I was trying to say is that I was already there when Man United, Sir Alex had already established a very successful reign. Now the key is then to maintain it. So what you have is that a club like Man United always have the highest of ambitions. Yeah, they want to win every trophy on show: Premier League, Champions League, FA Cup, League Cup, etc. Now with that, knowing that, then there are expectations. Now to meet those expectations, you have to have certain standards. And to meet those standards, you need to take certain responsibilities. Now, all that together, and that revolves, that's constant. And that obviously brings a level of kind of pressure, and that is coming back to what you said before, Steve, in terms of that was what it all mattered to Ferguson in terms of, but on his daily man management thing, I never felt any of that pressure. I never felt any negative kind of pressure. Never. Every time, there was never a moment that I drove to Carrington that I thought, flipping heck, I'm not too sure about this. We need to get right. You know why? Because we knew exactly what we wanted, what I just said about those ambitions and expectations and standards. Those needed to be met.
Not afraid of them, basically. Just
not afraid at all. Those are needed to be met every training session. Ferguson created that environment about winners, and those winners, they looked after each other. They were the enforcers of making sure that this is happening. If there was other ones there, they were told in certain terms that this is what we expect. And for me, and that was the important thing for me, because Ferguson always said to me, listen, Rene, everything we do in training will manifest itself in the game, good and bad. So you need to make sure that we are absolutely top notch. We expect a world-class performance from them 3 times a week. They have the rest of the time they'll be able to lean on a world-class support from us on and off the pitch. So everything was there. So it was not just the players, it was about everything, in terms of what happened in the kitchen, what happened to strength and conditioning, the medical department, everything, the video side of it. Everything had these things: ambitions, expectations, standards, responsibilities.
And you came in as first team coach with a team that obviously eventually went on to win the double. What was it like coaching that team and being on the training pitch with, everyone knows the name, the Rooney's, Ronaldo's, Rio, Vidic, etc., and watching that team go from where they went on to just dominating?
Well, in 2006 when you joined, obviously, this is peak Mourinho. Mourinho was just done back-to-back.
Just come in
You got Chelsea doing an absolute madness. Was there any sort of belief that this United team is capable of doing what it went and do? Obviously, 3 titles back-to-back without 115 charges.
Yeah. Well, I didn't sort of probably not realise it as such at the time because, when you're in it, when you're at it, you just deal with it what's right in front of you. But those things that Ferguson told me, resonated with me. But I was never in any shape or form any nervous about it because I knew that's where my strength lie. He was very clear in terms of explaining to me, and it's also in the book, written in the book. When he promoted Mick to assistant manager, he called me in to talk about the first team job. And he says, Rene, I don't have to tell you how to run sessions. You do a great job, this and that and the other. But I want us to be on the same hymn sheet in terms of that, what does that best Man United look like, in my opinion? And he had this flip chart, and he's written a few things on it from a defensive point of view, whether when we want to press high or when we want to press at the block and all those defensive stuff and quick transition and etc. And next one was all about possession, which is...
I'm just going to have to pause you there because it pisses me off that pressing and transition footballs only existed since about 2015. And it was clearly something there nearly 20 years ago.
Of course.
So people call Fergie nowadays, I don't know if you go on Twitter much, it's a bit vitriolic and stuff, but people kind of make a thing that Fergie was never a great tactician or a great, he was just purely a manager and he motivated them?
No. Totally disagree with that. Totally disagree. Come back to that in a minute, but he was very clear, and the key was like this. What I'm just explaining now, that was purely everything was basically tactical about how we wanted to execute that.
Yeah.
When he closed his eyes, this is when I see the best United defend. When we are in possession, this is when I see the best United. So in possession, there was a few things there, that was so clear to me. The best teams in the world, they are the ones that control that possession. And possession is the one that creates momentum. So if you've got it, you take the initiative, and if you turn a possession into chances and score goals, then you control the game. And if you're then suddenly making sure that you score more than them, 2 or 3 more, you start to dominate the game. Those were the sort of momentums you're going to get through. But within that possession, he said the best teams, it's all about rhythm, creating rhythm, maintaining rhythm, and changing rhythm. That's what the best midfielders do. And we have a few that can do that, like i.e. Scholes. And then he said, I want all my players to have that in their heads. Think forward, look forward, play forward. He hated it when players played the ball back when they could have gone forward or square. He hated it. So that was all elements in the training, that I had to integrate. Forward, think forward, look forward, play forward. Now, and it was all about breaking lines. There's another golden rule that we all said. If there's no pressure on the ball from a defender or a midfielder, forward runs. As soon as you see that, no pressure, can you head up, forward runs. And other players that saw forward runs, they had to then come in the pocket. So we always had 2 options to do that. And then be able to change the rhythm when we build up. Sometimes it's like 2 touch, a bit of a labor, you try to drag people out. But if you then get onto the opposite half and it gets congested, it had to jump into 1 touch football, all back through. You know what I mean? We always had a simple golden rule in training, because if 5 players touch the ball twice, it's about 10 seconds. Control, pass. They all touch the ball once, duck. Yeah, it's only 5 seconds.
We think of some of those great goals, especially on the way to the ones at Arsenal and so on.
If you look at that, it's unbelievable. Yeah. And the last one, that's the most important thing, because that really sums for me, that typifies Ferguson's eras and the teams, and especially the team in the last 6 years. He said, when we attack, he says, I want us to attack with pace, power, penetration, and unpredictability. And I want you to instill those 4 things in everything you do and every single day in training. Whether it's a finishing session, whether it's a conditioning game, whether it's small-sided games and all that. So the players, in three flip charts, that was my curriculum for what I needed to do. It was very simple,
and very work around that.
Very straightforward. And the whole tactical bit from Fergie was that he had a very flexible mind, because what his strength was always making sure that the tactics were utilized in such a way that every player would play to their strengths. So in other words, if we got a really, really good technical forward player, but he's not quick, then don't send him into space. Yeah. Give it him to feet and let him do his stuff. You know what I mean? Simple things like that.
It's obvious, yeah.
But he was, and again, the one thing as well, he never overcomplicated things, because there were clear guidelines in our defensive structure of play, because that has to be clear. Because if you say we're going to really press really high, then everybody has to be involved, know the roles and do it. If 1 or 2 don't do it, forget about it. So defensively, there were clear jobs and responsibilities. But from a possession-based scenario and attacking, there was a lot of freedom. Because that enhances creativity. And creativity enhances and unpredictability. But if you going to tell players in going forward as well to say, no, if this happens, you have to do this. If this happens, what we did, we showed the trends of how the opposition conceded goals. And then we showed them options that in the players that we have, this is the best way to achieve that. But you guys on the pitch have to make that final decision, not us.
You have to play what you see as well, don't you?
Because if you start to think and overthink too much because I want to please the manager because he told me I need to do this, it slows the decision-making process down. Because you're constantly thinking, did I right thing?
If I don't want to make the wrong decision.
But also, like you said, you need to play what you see. Sometimes things happen in a split second. And then the ball has to be played, otherwise it's too late.
Yeah. How do you think? Let's say Fergie didn't retire.
Can you stay for about 7 hours or something?
Which is an amazing thought.
Right?
How do you think Fergie would have? Do you think he's? Again, this is a question I ask, knowing the answer deep inside personally, but it's for some of the narratives that are out there and exist. How do you think Sir Alex Ferguson's team would succeed or not succeed in this modern era with the way football has changed, or Do you think he would have been?
See, first and foremost, when everybody, and 10 years is sort of
Long
sometimes
time.
a long time and sometimes not a long time, because look back to it, how quickly they've gone. It's like that, 10 years.
Yeah.
But I got that question a lot of time, and I keep saying the time and keep repeating myself. I tell you, guarantee, 100% guaranteed, if Ferguson would have carried on, yeah, and everybody else would have carried on with the team that we've had, that everybody said was aging, I'm 100% sure we would have done the right business, you know, in terms of bringing the right players in and making sure that we kept that energy and intensity up that we wanted. We had a fantastic squad with a lot of experience in there, which is needed. And I'm telling you, if you would have carried on, we would have been there or thereabouts, and I would have made a strong case for us again to win the league again. Now, the thing with this is, if you look at Sir Alex Ferguson, how good he is, and I tried to describe that in the book, but one of his main qualities was adaptability. He was always ready to adapt to new things and new developments. He did that, you know, from when he started in '86. He did it in the '90s.
Wenger
he did it
came,
in 2000.
Mourinho came,
he always adapted, and also he was also listening to influences. What is happening? You know what I mean? You know, and the amount of people that's come into the club. I'm testament of one of them. You know, in bringing me in, I'm going to bring a skills coach in because of that reason. Then he eventually realised, hey, we actually can do something with that with the first team. You know what I mean? And it proved that it worked. So he was always looking for those edges. Yeah, of course. Would the team if he would have carried on for another 5 years, would have it looked the same? No, probably not. Then probably 6 players would have probably disappeared. What would have been replaced with?
But he was like bringing Wilfred Zaha in. I think that was Fergie's signing, wasn't it? There was a lot of talk as well, Rooney moving on and kind of Kagawa and Van Persie being the future with Kagawa in the hole and Van Persie. It would have been if that was the front two, for example, that's a completely different style to the way we were already playing.
That 2008 side, just to go back a minute ago, that 2008 side would have adapted to Premier League in the last 3 or 4 years without a single hiccup.
Well, if you look at the midfield, Hargreaves, Carrick, Scholes, I mean, in terms of pressing, Hargreaves was one of the best at kind of pressing.
In terms of holding possession, not a problem.
No.
What about that? Is that 08 team the best you've worked with?
Well, like I said, if most of them have been there the whole period that I was there, you know what I mean, with a few players that have come in. Obviously, just when I saw the joint, Michael Carrick came in, who's been proven an absolute hit when he came in. You know, they stabilised. I mean, Chicharito came in, you know, later on, and I think, you know, fantastic signing in that respect. Berbatov obviously came in. We had Tevez. You know, if you look at it, he was just riddled with
when
quality.
a player like Berbatov comes in and his style is kind of completely different to those players around, how do you work with that as a coach? Like, are there anything you will implement based around Berbatov and his attributes to kind of get the best out of him in the team, or is it more making him?
No, a bit of both. I don't know. Did you ever hear the story? And it's written in the book as well. But have you ever heard the story that I spoke to him about the piano?
No.
We were training, and it was like an 8v8 on the front, small pitch, intense, and it went, and really good quality and fantastic. But obviously, Berbat's team lost, and can you tell those players, you know, how to play football? No, but tongue in cheek, you know what I mean. So he went to sit down on this box with the water bottles in it. So I thought to myself, how do I going to address this? And I said to Berbatov, do you like music? He said, yeah, I love it. He says, what's your favourite instrument that you think, I don't know if you can play it, but if you would be able to, you could pick and choose, what would you play? He said, piano. Great. I said, now imagine you are the best piano player in the world. You've got a distinctive style everywhere in the world, full house, fantastic. You see those guys over there? That's the biggest and best band in the world, with the most famous conductor, and they've got a very distinctive style. They play very upbeat rhythm, very quick. You know what I mean? Now you play a slightly different style. You know what I mean? Now I can go and ask the band to play in your tempo, but that won't happen. Now, if you would have to play with the band as your specialist pianist, and you would play the same tune as him, you would elevate the whole band and everybody. Do you see where I'm coming from? So, whereas he at times wanted to hold on and slow things down, we had the red arrows flying by. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In Nani, Park, Valencia, Ronaldo, Rooney,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
everyone.
It says, so the moment when you do that, you know, then we're missing that opportunity to break those lines and get in behind. So a lot of times you need to be ready to maybe play one touch around the corner, or because you know the runners are coming. You know what I mean? So we obviously had a good laugh about it, but I thought that was a really good way of explaining it.
He was an unreal player, and when we signed him, it was kind of like it just didn't quite make it, because even Fergie left him at the Champions League final squad and stuff like that. Did he used to consult you guys on decisions like that?
Yeah. We had all the discussion, but that was hard, because the hardest thing Sir Alex would always say in the dressing room as well is the hardest thing for me as a coach is to pick those 11 and to leave those others on the bench, but more than anything to leave them out. And when that happened around the Champions League final, I remember it was just because we were defensively short in terms of, if anything happens, we have to put somebody or such and such on the bench to making sure that we're covered. Otherwise,
was there an expectation that we were probably playing on the back foot as well, and pace would probably be more of an asset than
Owing off the bench seemed like a better option at the time.
Maybe, but we always felt, especially because if you look at both finals, one in Rome and one in Wembley, the one
got out my memory there.
But the one in Rome,
about.
haven't they? But in Rome, I thought that the game actually was quite even in terms, if you look at the stats and everything.
Oh, if G scores early doors, if G scores early doors, we're winning a lot.
You know what I mean? And obviously, if you look at the changes we made and the players that came on, eventually, you know what I mean. But rather than us getting the equaliser, Messi scores a little bit at that time against the run of play with that header, and that was the sucker punch. If you look at the Wembley one, again, I thought we started really well. There was a really good moment in the early parts of the game. Then obviously suddenly they scored, you know, again, nothing, was a little bit of a sort of a nothing goal. I don't think they created much more than that. We got a good goal back by Wayne. We knew that was those goals. The game was going through those phases.
That was a great goal as well. We forget about that goal.
Yeah, it was a great goal.
Such a good goal.
But the game was going through those phases, and I always felt, listen, it's not a problem. As long as we were in the game with 20 to 25 minutes to go, because we have got a far better bench than they. Because every time, if they're going to have to take players off, it's going to make them weaker. Whereas we, you know, not going to get weaker. We're probably going to get stronger because we've got something else to throw on. We have plenty of players. But we did know that Barcelona at that particular time, that was a clear trend. As soon as they came out of the second half, they would try to suffocate opposition. They would put so much pressure on.
Try and wrap the game up.
Yeah, so much, and they tried to really bang, you know, straight away. And you know, we weren't, you know, we knew it, we were coming, but we weren't prepared enough for it at the time, I felt. And you know, they scored at 2-1 fairly quickly. I think I can't remember what time it was. But they were then also, I think, a better team than they were in Rome.
Yeah, much better.
After 2 years.
In Rome, I think we were probably the better team.
We were so unlucky.
We should have played Wembley, Chelsea as well, really, again.
Wembley we got battered, really. I think it was one of those where we had a puncher's chance, but we weren't really in control.
Yeah, but sometimes you have to go through these momentums, and then if you then suddenly, because they tire, whatever reason, and suddenly there's a moment that falls in our favour, that momentum can change. You know what I mean? And that never happened. It fell on the other side. It was frustrating.
One of the chapters in the book here says the Barcelona study. That feels like a good point to go. What's the Barcelona study?
It is basically that, you know, there was obviously with all the games we were very, very well prepared, but I tried to explain, especially that one, that people get a really good insight. Okay, what were the things we were looking at, and what were the plans set out, and you know, for those games, because they are the last games of the season, the biggest games of the season. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's just a shame really that we never came out on top. The funny thing enough is after the Wembley one, we played Barcelona again a few weeks later in Washington for the pre-season, and we basically said, boss, are we still believing that is the way to beat Barcelona? Because if we do, we have to reiterate that to the players, because we had just a few different players then, you know, playing in the team. I think Nani played and I think Michael Owen played. But to be fairly honest, they executed it absolutely to perfection, and we won that game. You know, we did. It doesn't mean anything. But
that's the real quiz.
I think we should share the trophy.
Yeah. If you could have a moment or like a little anecdote to sum up your relationship with Fergie, what would it be? Because you obviously had a great relationship, a long relationship. Is there a moment or something that you think of that just reminds you of him?
Well, we both nearly had a heart attack at Chelsea when McPhelan popped the balloon. McPhelan popped the balloon. Nah, it's like, I mean, obviously I spent so much time with him, and funny enough as well, as because if we travelled anywhere on the bus, I was always sitting next to him. How that happened, I don't know. And the same on the train. You know, he was always on the same table as myself, and Simon Wells was sitting next to me. But those were great conversations, because it was not, and that's what I liked and really appreciated about him, because some managers, coaches, they can only talk about football.
Isn't he a big JFK nerd?
Well, he is he's a walking encyclopedia. He has got so much knowledge, unbelievable. The amount, but eventually I came with an iPad. Fantastic. You know, who wants to be a millionaire?
Yeah.
I mean, do you know that, boss?
Yeah.
You like Chris's, don't you? Yeah. The amount of times that we've played it, and the amount of times that we got, you know, to become a millionaire.
They like that. You don't hear about this side of Fergie. And of course, he has to switch off from football.
Because he's a grandfather and things like that as well.
That's what I liked about him. Honestly, he could speak so passionately about so many other things. And music, you know, he's knew everything about music. You know, it was great. He had us once because we always used to, you know, when we go away games, the players would eat. You know, for us, we would then eat with the staff together. You know, and that was also part of his, you know, his management style, because informally, he knew exactly what was going on. When you do things informally, people are, you know, easy to speak to and freely, and rather than sticking them formally on the top. And what do you think? You know what I mean? So, but he was always great, and there was always stories flying left, right, and centre. But I never forget the one where he said, "I got a riddle for you guys," and he says, "It's about movies," and it says that there's an American actress that has wore the same coat in every film she played in. And I says, think about that. And so we go and talking. And so the names are flying over the table, you know, at the end of the dinner, like Catherine Hepburn, no, Clark Gable, no.
Lassie.
And it was Lassie. It was Lassie, and I thought, oh my God.
It's a bad dad joke, isn't it?
It is, but I tell you what, I've heard it a number of times. and then he would probably do it again, you know, so many months later. And then, all right, let's throw some actresses in.
Obviously, when Fergie left, your time at the club was up. Was that the plan, or was your plan?
No, not initially. No, because obviously initially there was. The conversations that we had was that obviously they decided, you know, and the club that David was coming in, and he was only going to bring Jimmy Lumsden, you know, some sort of a soundboard, whatever. But there was no planning to do anything with Mick, myself, or Eric, or whatever. That was the intention. That was the idea that we all had, and that's why we carried on. No problem, because we still had a few games to play.
Do you feel that, I mean, it's been spoken about a lot before. Do you feel like that was a mistake, letting all of that experience, everything go? Or do you understand it being someone that kind of has had managerial roles as well? Yeah,
you will, but it's understandable. But in hindsight, is a nice thing, because if you look back and, you know, when he would have been absolutely successful, nobody would have, you know, said a word about people going. But when it didn't work out, then people start to think, well, hold on a minute, why did he not keep those people? And I know, I'm sure that Mick and Steele had similar conversations that I had with David, and I basically said nothing else than, David, please, the only thing that we want is you and Man United to remain successful. But it's just it's a different kettle of fish, it's a different animal. But we've got a lot of experience, you know, dealing with this and the club, so, you know, listen to us and let us carry on with it, and you'll find your way in, you know what I mean? But on those conversations, it became clear to me that he was very hands-on. He wanted, obviously, to do most of it himself, and you know, and obviously then I found out that Mick was going and Eric was going, and, you know, basically, you know, it was a situation.
It was going to be a completely different club, wasn't it?
Yeah, I felt he was. I think he was really keen, and obviously do it himself in his way with his people, and rightly so, Steve. Sometimes that happens in clubs when other managers come in and they've got a strong connection with other staff members they've been successful with, to bring them along.
With no disrespect to yourself, obviously, but I'm glad he didn't keep you around, because if we'd have stayed successful, it'd have been because of you and Mick and the rest of the staff that was around, and we'd have kept Moyes. thinking he
I
knew what
I
he
wouldn't
was
have
doing.
minded being successful, no
but
matter
do you know what I
who
mean?
was to blame.
We'd have kept it around, and we'd have all gone, no, he knows what he's doing. He's won one title, he can win it again, and we'd have kept him for fucking 7 years, and it'd have been even worse.
But it would have been all right if we were winning.
No, because you'd have won one, you'd have fluked one, and then you'd be hanging on thinking.
Now you're stuck with someone.
Yeah,
because
because he's won one title, and now you're thinking, like, you're 9 years deep, and we didn't have any of the rest of them, and now you're just thinking, no, this year he'll get it. He will get it this year. No, I know we're in the Conference League, but don't worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've got parking to get attended to. If you've got a ticket, don't worry, it's us. That will sort you out. It's been amazing speaking to you today. Obviously, we absolutely appreciate what you've done and helped, your part in Manchester United's history. There's the book itself. It was promoted by Steve until he's just absolutely gone, hold it. There you go. Get stuck into that. It's on Amazon, all your good book places as well.
The first book's a good one. And the first book obviously is a very sort of technical book if you're interested in any sort of coaching, or even if you're just like a bad United nerd and goes, I wouldn't mind knowing, because like I said, there's a lot of the way things were sort of set up. Like I said, I haven't read this yet, but I'll probably finish this in a weekend, I imagine, because it's right up my street. And Rene, it's always great to speak to you. I love
absolutely.
You.
Thanks.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming. Guys, we'll put a link to the book in the description below. Go and check that out. Rene's all over socials as well, so go and follow him and tell him how much you've enjoyed the book and this chat today. I've absolutely loved it. It's always good talking about the good times and the successful times at Manchester United. Thank you very much, Rene.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
you. We'll see you in a bit.